Hey, what's going on, guys? We have some breaking news. Ian Machado Garry is out of his UFC 296 fight against Vincente Luque. Super disappointing. There was rumors all day. Chael Sonnen at one point was reporting it. I really didn't think it was going to end up being true. I thought Chael Sonnen is reporting it. It's definitely false. He's not a very good source of information. Dana White came out and put out a video saying it is true. Ian Machado Garry apparently had the flu, and then it turned into pneumonia. He was going to try to fight, turned into pneumonia, and now he pulled out of the event, which is super disappointing. I mean, when you have the biggest name on the card in Ian Machado Garry now pulling out of his fight, it just kind of dampens the event a little bit. I know a lot of people, including myself, were really looking forward to Ian Machado Garry versus Vincente Luque, and now it's not happening. And I understand that a lot of people are going to start off by reacting to this news and pretending like it's some conspiracy theory that Ian Machado Garry didn't want to answer to the media. So, I know earlier today, Ian Machado Garry skipped media day. He didn't show up at media day because he was sick. Now, I thought there could be a play where Garry just said, you know what, I'm not showing up to media day. I'm not going to show up to the press conference. And that would amplify his name value. I thought really that would amplify his name value. And if you've been watching this sport for a long time, this is a bit of an exaggeration, but Nick Diaz built half of his popularity by not showing up for press conferences. At one point, he had a title shot, refused to show up for the press conferences. They pulled him from the title shot. Then some weird things happened with the division. He ended up fighting on that card, but then he got the very next title shot, and his popularity grew exponentially just because everyone was like, yes, look at Nick Diaz. He's not, going to the UFC press conferences, and he's sticking it to the UFC. And, a lot of people kind of got behind that because it was something memorable. It was something different. But this is not the case at all. Ian Machado Garry is sick, and that's why he pulled out. And I think not only are people who were just looking forward to the fight, looking forward to the matchup, looking forward to seeing Garry tested, I think those people are going to be disappointed. But the people who have been mercilessly hating on Ian Garry over the past month, I think are going to be really disappointed as well. And that just straight up proves my point that I made in a video a couple weeks ago. Ian Machado Garry is the biggest name on this card. He is the most popular fighter on this card. Popularity doesn't necessarily mean liked. It can mean disliked. Everyone was looking forward to seeing Ian Machado Garry either go out there and get the win, or a lot of people were looking forward to, can Vincente Luque knock him out? And now that this fight is off the card, it's super disappointing. Because whether you were rooting for him or rooting against him, now it's like, that's a big fight. It had a big fight feel. There's all this personal stuff going on behind the scenes. And Gary's talking about, I don't like the fact that my family's being disrespected. And you have online personalities, whether it be YouTubers or, fighters or Twitter, MMA Twitter guys, making up fan fiction surrounding Ian Machado Garry and kind of driving these certain narratives. And then you also have fighters who are chiming in on this type of stuff, and people were looking forward to the press conference tomorrow, and now none of it's going to happen. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around whether or not this is a good thing or bad thing, because Garry has been the only discussion of UFC 296 fight week. It felt like this week, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments, it felt like as if Garry was the main event this Saturday. I genuinely believe if you booked Garry versus Wonderboy, versus Shavkat, versus Leon, versus Colby, let's say any of those matchups got shifted around. Let's say hypothetically, I know Bilal's a backup, but let's say hypothetically Colby pulled out for whatever reason, and you threw Ian Machado Garry into the main event fighting for the title, I think that pay-per-view would have done so much better than the existing pay-per-view main event. I think that's how big Gary's name has grown and kind of matured over the past month or so. Love him or hate him, and now it's just super disappointing. I was really looking forward to this Vincente Luque fight. For me personally, I thought this was the perfect test to really find out how good Garry is. We've seen him beat up on Neil Magny. We've seen him knock out Daniel Rodriguez. But Vincente Luque, he's in a different category. He's like 2 steps up from a Neil Magny, in my opinion. He has good jiu-jitsu, has good grappling, has good striking, has decent power. And now we're really not going to get that question answered because Garry got sick. Garry had to pull out. And this is horrible timing because his name has never been hotter. But I'm wondering, and I'm just reacting to this news literally in real time. I just found out 5 minutes ago. Dana White basically announced it 10 minutes ago. I was already under the assumption there's no way this is true, basically. You know, I was tweeting out some things like, oh, bet your house there's no way he's pulling out of this fight, because Chael Sonnen said it. I don't trust Chael Sonnen. Anything he says, I think the complete opposite. So I was pretty confident in that. So I do have to say, and I know I said it off the top, but I was 100% wrong. Not that I made a video on it. I wasn't that confident in it, but I was, tweeting out saying there's no way Chael Sonnen just wants to keep his name in the headlines. But it really just kind of tears UFC 296 apart. Any other fight cancellation, I think, would have been better outside of maybe the main event. But even as long as you could have got a replacement for the main event, I'm telling you right now, from what I've seen from the MMA community, this is only anecdotal evidence. It's not like there's some scientific way to prove this. Most people were excited for Ian Machado Garry versus Vincente Luque. That was number one. That was number one for UFC 296. That was the biggest fight of the card. And even if Luque would have pulled out and they would have got a replacement, no matter who it was to fight Garry, that still would have been okay. We would have still got to see Garry fight on UFC 296. But now it kind of throws cold water onto the whole situation. But I do think if Garry can recover and make a quick turnaround, not really even a quick turnaround, but return rather quickly, I think that, he can still kind of get that star power back. I still think his name is as big as ever. I think he's a bigger name than Leon Edwards. I think he's a bigger name than Colby Covington. I think had he won at UFC 296, that wouldn't even be a question. What I'm saying right now is kind of debatable, and, I'm pretty confident in what I'm saying. But had he, let's say Garry went out there and put on a statement performance against Vincente Luque, I don't think there would have been any doubt. Let's say Garry went out there and knocked out Vincente Luque in the first round. There would have been no doubt. Garry would have transcended into the biggest name in the welterweight division. I think he arguably is the biggest name in the welterweight division currently. But unfortunately, he gets sick. He pulls out. There's not going to be him at the press conference. I'm sure plenty of fighters are going to shit on him at the press conference and say, yeah, he was too scared to show up. He pulled out because he was scared. And that's going to be the conspiracy theory. People are going to say the real reason Ian Machado Garry pulled out is because he was worried about the press conference. I'm not sure these people live in the real world. And maybe I'm naive, maybe I'm just built different, but you're telling me Garry is going to pull out of a fight that's going to make him a lot of money and build his brand because he's worried about Colby Covington potentially stumbling over his words and mumbling insults and saying, oh, you're a cuck, or making up and using the lies that a lot of people have said just because they dislike Garry. Oh, you took your wife's ex-husband's last name. You're telling me a grown man is so worried that another grown man might lobby 13-year-old insults at him, something that teenagers would use to insult each other. That's basically what you're telling me. I just find that really hard to believe. And if that is true, if that's somehow ever proven to be true, I'll be the first to say that is the softest thing I've ever heard of. I could not imagine being so worried that someone might be mean to me on a stage, so I'm not going to show up for my paycheck. So I don't buy that conspiracy theory at all. And I do believe, I haven't seen the full reaction yet, from the fan base, because this just happened. This literally just got announced. But I already have a feeling a lot of people are going to be just perpetuating that conspiracy theory that this is the real reason. He was scared of Colby. Has anyone actually listened to Colby talk at all? Has anyone listened to Colby talk at all? Half the time he doesn't even make sense. He talks about Leon Edwards and say, Leon, all he does is mumble. Colby, he said some line about Strickland the other day, and I can't remember it, but I'm gonna butcher it. But it was something like, he tries to be everything I wish I was. I don't even know what that means. I'm not even sure what that means. It's because he constantly stumbles over his words and he says things that doesn't necessarily make sense, and he tries to be this WWE-esque figure. And fair enough to him. There is a market for that. But to say that Garry is not going to show up for a big paycheck or a decent paycheck, a fight that's going to propel him to stardom, a fight that's going to push him towards the top of the welterweight division, a fight that's going to push him towards a title fight in the division, probably one more fight after that. You're telling me he's just going to pull out and no show because he's worried about sitting on a stage with Colby Covington, who's 36 years old, who doesn't fight, who's been hiding in witness protection for years, who pretends he's a draw, even though when he fought a bigger draw in Jorge Masvidal, that he only sold under 400,000 pay-per-view buys. Meanwhile, Aljamain Sterling's doing 275, 300, and Colby's doing under 400 against a bigger draw in Jorge Masvidal. No, I don't buy that at all. I think that theory, you can throw it completely out. But I do think if Gary's going to be out for a while, let's say he needs to recover from this for a couple weeks, and then, he puts back on some weight, and then he needs to get back into a training camp, and then, cut back down, and then get a fight rebooked, and, let's say this pushes him back till February or March. I think most likely, if I had to guess, I don't know. The UFC could make a quick turnaround. Ian Garry could want a quick turnaround. But if I had to guess right now, off the top of my head, without having a lot of time to really dissect this, I think the smart move is just to hold Ian Machado Garry to UFC 300, which is in April, which sucks really badly. But I think that would be massive to build his star power, which is already budding. I mean, Conor McGregor, and I hate to make this comparison because I know people are like, Ian Machado Garry tries to be Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor always had this, you could feel it coming. You could feel the star power of Conor just generating, but it wasn't quite there yet. And then he went out there and stopped Dennis Siver. And then it was a little bit more. And then he went out there and stopped Chad Mendes on short notice. Chad Mendes came in on short notice. And then it really started to be there. But then when he went out there and flatlined Jose Aldo, it was unbelievable. It was there. You couldn't deny it anymore. And the same kind of thing happened with Ronda Rousey. And I think Ian Garry's win over Luque, if he did go out there and get a big win over Luque, he was right there on the cusp of one of the bigger draws in the welterweight division. That's completely speculation. That's completely unproven just yet. But I think had he went out there and got this mega performance against Luque, it would have done a lot for his career. But I think if you're going to wait, let's say Ian Garry needs till at least February. Okay, could you throw him on UFC 298? But why not wait the extra 6, 7, 8 weeks and throw him on UFC 300? Dana White was talking earlier today about, oh, okay, we're going to stack UFC 300 where you're going to be looking at the first prelim and saying, how is this the first prelim? So I think that would probably still do well. But I would like for him, I would love if he just turned around at UFC 297 and then people could get the press conference they wanted because Sean Strickland will be there. Sean Strickland, Dricus du Plessis, main event of UFC 297 in January 20th in Canada. Imagine you have Ian Machado Garry on the same card. All the people who love kind of the soap opera aspect of MMA are going to be like, oh my God, Strickland said something crazy. He said he called Garry a cuck. Oh my God, Gary's feelings must be hurt so badly. You can still kind of get that effect. But if it's not going to be 297, 298, 299, might as well make it 300. And that will be a massive fight. And honestly, forget about the Luque fight. I don't want the Luque fight. If Colby Covington loses to Leon Edwards at UFC 296, the fight to make is Colby Covington versus Ian Machado Garry at UFC 300. Main card fight, depending on how stacked the card is, that could be a co-main event, that could be a featured fight. That would be a mega fight. You have Ian Machado Garry as the A side, Colby Covington, low tier draw. Maybe he gets a little bit more attention. He's more relevant now because he's going to be fighting Leon Edwards shortly. That's the fight to make, in my opinion. That is the fight to make. I think you need to make Colby Covington, if he loses against Leon Edwards, versus Ian Machado Garry at UFC 300. If not, okay, maybe you turn Luque around, you turn Garry around, and you rebook the same fight for UFC 297 in roughly a month. But I have a feeling that's not going to work out. In terms of late notice replacements for Luque, there's not a lot of options. I've seen some people saying, well, Bilal's the backup. Maybe Bilal can step in. We've already seen that. We've seen Bilal versus Luque. Recently, semi-recently, Bilal won that fight pretty clear cut. Nobody wants to see that ran back. Luque's not close to the title picture. Bilal's #1 contender. It makes absolutely no sense to kind of rebook that. So I don't know. Maybe they could pull someone off the street like a Kevin Holland or someone that's just itching to fight. Maybe JDM is ready to step in. JDM, I know supposedly he's going to fight Gilbert Burns at UFC 298. That's not official yet. JDM seems like he's down to step in on short notice fights sometimes. Maybe you book, I don't know where JDM is at now. If he has to fly across the country, we're already it's almost Thursday. So I don't know if that really makes sense as well. But if JDM is in the area, if JDM's in Las Vegas, which I doubt he is, book Luque versus JDM for UFC 296. I think that would be a banger to open up the main card. But it is very unfortunate. I'm personally disappointed. I know a lot of fans are disappointed. But at the same time, I'm kind of laughing at the Ian Machado Garry haters because a lot of these people were hating on him so much, using a lot of lies to kind of make fun of him just because if you don't like him, fair enough, completely fair enough. He's kind of cringy. The trash talk isn't great. But to use him as a media vehicle is disgusting, is disturbing, and to make up lies. I really think Ian Machado Garry should issue a legal letter and demand an apology by 5 p.m. I really think he should. Now, for those of you who don't know that, that's kind of a shout out to Hunter Campbell. But I am laughing at them because you guys hated on Ian Machado Garry so much. Oh, he's a bum. Oh, I can't wait to see him lose. He doesn't even show up for media day. He now doesn't show up for his fight because he's sick. He's not there anymore. I still think this will help his name a little bit because I think, again, all fight week, let me know, correct me if I'm wrong, there's been no talk of Colby Covington. Colby Covington's his WWE draw, supposedly. There's been no talk of him. There's been nothing but talk about Ian Machado Garry. So it does dampen the card, but I'm still looking forward to it. It just is disappointing. For me personally, I just wanted to see Garry tested. I really just wanted to see how he would do against some of the more top-tier fighters in the welterweight division, like Vincente Luque. I love the fact that there was a bunch of welterweight fights on this card. And unfortunately, now we're not going to get to see it. And we don't know when Garry will fight again. So we'll have to wait and see what kind of news comes out of this. Maybe Dana White will give us an update on during the press conference tomorrow. Maybe on Saturday during the post-fight press conference. But let me know what you guys want to see. What do you want to see next for Ian Machado Garry? Also, if Colby beats Leon, I want to see Garry versus Edwards at UFC 300. Because former teammates, Garry saying he got kicked out of the gym because Edwards was uncomfortable with him. That's a massive fight. If not, oh my, I'm coming up with a bunch of good ideas now. If Edwards loses to Covington, which is very possible, book Edwards versus Garry as a fight night main event, a 5-round fight night main event in the UK. Dana White's talking about going to Manchester, talking about, going to these different places over in the UK. Book it. That would be massive. Edwards coming off a loss. Gary's kind of a budding star looking for an entry into the top 10. Book that fight. That'd be massive. That would have a great storyline and it'd be a very compelling fight. And it would fast track Garry to a title shot, which I'm sure the UFC wants to do because of his name value. So let me know what you guys think of all those potential options. But again, I do not think Ian Garry pulled out of fear. Oh, he's worried Colby's going to be mean to him at the press conference. You guys aren't living in the real world. You're spending too much time online. But let me know what you think. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe. And thank you so much for watching.